The night Daniel Carter left, he told himself he was doing the right thing. He stood at the edge of the bed, watching his wife, Emma, curled up in sleep, one hand resting on her swollen belly. A child. Their child. Daniel clenched his fists. He should have been happy, excited, overwhelmed with love, but all he felt was fear. His mind had never left the battlefield. The screams, the gunfire, the weight of bodies in his arms, it all followed him home. He woke in cold sweats, hands shaking, the walls of their small home closing in like the suffocating grip of war. He had seen too much death, and the idea of being responsible for life, for a child, felt like an impossible burden. He had already lost himself. What if he lost them too? The voice in his head whispered the truth he feared most. You're already broken. If you stay, you'll only break them too. So, he left. He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye. He walked out into the night, carrying nothing but his memories and the unbearable weight of his own self-hatred. Emma woke up to emptiness. The bed beside her was cold, the closet door left slightly open, Daniel's clothes gone. At first, she thought maybe he had gone for a drive. Maybe he needed air. Maybe he just needed time. But hours turned to days. Days turned to weeks. She searched for him, left messages, called every contact she could think of. But Daniel had disappeared like a ghost, leaving no trail, no explanation. And then, she went into labor. Alone. The pain was unbearable, but nothing compared to the devastation of realizing he wasn't coming back. And when the doctor held out her firstborn child, she barely had time to process the shock before he announced there were 3 more. Quadruplets. Emma nearly broke under the weight of it. 4 children, 4 mouths to feed, 4 little lives, born into the world without a father. She had no choice but to be strong because Daniel hadn't been. Time hardened Emma. She learned to function on exhaustion, to juggle work, child care, and the relentless ache in her chest where Daniel's love had once been. She never spoke his name, not to the kids, not to friends, not to anyone. As far as she was concerned, he was dead. And in many ways, he was. Daniel, now living under odd jobs and cheap motel rooms, had become a shadow of a man. He drifted from town to town, avoiding attachments, living in a haze of regret and alcohol. But no matter how far he ran, no matter how much he tried to bury the past, it never left him. And one day, it found him again. Daniel had planned to leave town that night. He should have. It would have been easier, but as he stood on that dimly lit sidewalk, his heart hammering against his ribs, he knew he couldn't walk away again. Not this time. He kept his distance at first, watching from across the street as the kids laughed and played, 4 of them, all identical in ways that made his stomach twist. They were his. How could he ever deny it? Then one of them looked up. A boy, maybe 10 years old if Daniel did the math right, the age they would be now. The boy frowned slightly as if recognizing something in Daniel's face, and then Emma appeared. She was different. The softness she once had was hardened into something unbreakable. There were no tears when she saw him, only cold, unforgiving rage. She strode across the street without hesitation, fire in her eyes. "What the hell are you doing here?" she spat, keeping her voice low, her body shielding the kids behind her. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. What could he possibly say? That he was sorry? That he regretted leaving? That he thought about them every day but was too much of a coward to come back? His silence was her answer. Emma stepped closer, her voice ablaze against his skin. "You don't get to show up here and pretend like you exist. You are nothing. You hear me? Nothing." The kids were watching now, confusion on their small faces. God, what had he done? Daniel finally spoke, his voice raw. "I didn't know about them." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "That's not an excuse. You left me, Daniel. You left us. And now you want to stand here and do... what? Beg for forgiveness? You don't deserve them." Her words hit harder than a bullet, but she wasn't wrong. Still, Daniel couldn't move. His feet were cemented to the ground. And that's when it happened. One of the kids, the same boy who had looked at him earlier, took a small step forward. "Who are you?" Emma stiffened. Her arms went out protectively. "No one." The boy didn't take his eyes off Daniel. Something inside him was searching, putting the pieces together. Daniel took a breath. "My name is Daniel." He swallowed the lump in his throat. He hesitated, then forced the words out. "I think I'm your father." Silence. A deep, gut-wrenching silence. The kids turned to Emma, waiting for confirmation, and her face crumbled. "Mom?" One of the girls' voices was small, scared. Emma's hands clenched at her sides. Then, as if it physically pained her, she muttered, "He was, a long time ago." And just like that, the door had been cracked open. Not much, but enough. Daniel saw the way his children looked at him now. Not with love, not with trust, but with questions. He knew it would take everything to earn the right to answer them. But for the first time in 10 years, he had a reason to try. Daniel sat alone on the bench outside the diner, hands clasped, staring at the cracked pavement beneath his boots. The night was cool, but sweat beaded on his forehead. He had come to town for a fresh start, yet somehow, fate had dragged him back to his past. The past that now had 4 sets of eyes watching him. "Why did you leave?" The voice was small but firm. Daniel looked up and felt his heart stop. Liam stood before him, one of the 4. Daniel opened his mouth, but the words didn't come. He saw the boy's resemblance to himself, to Emma, and it hit him like a punch to the gut. I thought I was doing what was best," Daniel finally managed, his voice hoarse. Liam's face twisted. "For who?" Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "For me." He wanted to say it, but he knew it wasn't the right answer. The truth was ugly. The truth was that he had been a coward. "I was scared," he admitted. "I thought I'd only mess things up." Liam crossed his arms, studying him. "Mom says you were a soldier. Soldiers don't get scared." Daniel chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "That's not true, kid. Soldiers are scared all the time, but we fight anyway." Liam's eyes narrowed. "So why didn't you fight for us?" Daniel flinched. "Because I didn't know how." But he knew now, and he wasn't running again. Liam was the first. Then came Sophia. Then Noah. Then Avenue. One by one, they found reasons to talk to him, to test him. Small conversations at first, about school, their hobbies, their dreams. And Daniel listened. For the first time in his life, he listened. He learned that Liam wanted to be a mechanic, that Noah loved animals, that Sophia wanted to be a writer, and Ava dreamed of traveling the world. 4 lives that had gone on without him. 4 lives he could still be a part of, if they let him. Emma, however, remained a wall between them. One evening, after noticing how often her children spoke about Daniel, she cornered him outside the diner. "You don't get to walk in and pretend you're their father," she snapped, anger and pain evident in her voice. "You lost that right when you walked out on me." Daniel took the hit. He had no defense. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm not here to pretend. His voice cracked. "I just want to try." Emma scoffed. "And what happens when it gets hard, Daniel? When you wake up one day and realize you're still broken? Do you walk away again?" The accusation cut deep, but this time he had an answer. "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "Because this time, I know what I'd be leaving behind." She didn't respond, but for the first time, she didn't tell him to leave. One stormy night, as the rain pounded against the windows, Daniel sat inside the diner, staring at the clock. He had been restless all day, something gnawing at his gut. Then his phone rang. Emma's voice was panicked. "Noah, he fell. He's hurt. I don't know what to do." Daniel was out the door before she could finish. By the time he arrived at the house, he saw Emma kneeling beside Noah, who lay on the ground, his arm bent the wrong way. "It's okay, bud," Daniel said, dropping to his knees, instincts taking over. "You're gonna be fine." He worked quickly, stabilizing Noah's arm while Emma called for an ambulance. Noah, crying in pain, looked up at Daniel and whimpered, "Don't go." Daniel's hands shook. He brushed the boy's hair back and whispered, "I'm right here." And for the first time in his life, he meant it. After that night, everything changed. Emma still had her walls up, but they weren't as high. She allowed Daniel to visit, to be a presence in their children's lives. The kids no longer treated him as a stranger, and Daniel, he still carried the guilt, the regret, but he no longer carried it alone. One afternoon, as he sat on the porch watching his children play, Emma stepped outside. "You really staying this time?" she asked. Daniel looked at her, then at the 4 lives he almost lost. "I already left once," he said. "I won't make that mistake again." Emma didn't answer, but this time she sat beside him. And for the first time, Daniel felt like he was home.